Welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast, where we're joined by your hosts, Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. In each episode, we'll be sharing valuable insights and tips to help you turn your NDIS business into a profitable venture. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, you've come to the right place. Let's stop surviving and start thriving.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast. My name is Paul and I'm joined with my amazing co-host Tania. Tania, how are you going?
Hey Paul, I'm well, thank you. I'm so excited for this episode today. We have Yusuf Mohamud from QM Lawyers joining us today to talk about the landmark precedent case around NDIA payment delays and what this means for NDIS businesses. So I am super excited. I will introduce Yusuf. Yusuf is the co-founder and principal lawyer at QM Lawyers and is committed to providing high quality legal services and is especially passionate about fighting for the underdog. Yusuf has acted for clients in a wide range of litigious matters, including defamation, owners corporation, discrimination, contractual property disputes, and more recently in the NDIS and aged care sectors for providers. Welcome, Yusuf. We are so glad to have you here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tania and Paul. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. When I saw this ruling, I read the whole thing. I read all however many pages was published. I, love regulation. I'm an NDIS commission auditor and love everything quality and compliance, which sometimes goes into the legal sector a little bit, and was just so glad to see this come about. So what we're talking about, in case our listeners aren't aware, there was a historic case which was Northern Disability Services versus the NDIA, where the court found that the NDIA had taken an unreasonable amount of time to pay the provider. Can you tell us a little bit about that case, Yusuf, about where this started, what position the provider was in, and a little bit of the background outside of what we've been able to read from the federal court?
Thanks, Tania. Yeah, it is quite a massive win for providers potentially. So my client, and a lot of this is detailed in the judgment, so I'll touch on some aspects of it. So essentially my client was operating for 8 years, and most providers are probably aware when they put in their payment claims, they get paid within 2 to 3 days. With this payment integrity team that's come in place this year, suddenly in the end of June, payments were put on hold for this provider. The provider came to us. We actually, for a whole 2 months, were contacting the NDIA ourselves on behalf of the client to resolve the payment issues. And it was through that correspondence that we realized, look, it's not going to go very far with the NDIA. We're going to need a third party involved here because they weren't giving a time frame for when they would make a decision. They weren't giving any indication what documents were missing. It was a fruitless exercise talking to the NDIA directly.
Yeah, amazing. And I have seen quite a lot of these letters, these payment requests and these payment locks. And I have referred them actually to lawyers. When it gets to a certain point, I read it and basically all I can do is help them collate the information. And to date, my advice has always been keep really good records of all of this information, have it readily available so you can simply press a button, export exactly what they've asked for and provide it within minutes. And so the faster you get things back, I hope that means the faster it gets processed. But it does seem to be a real big challenge for providers because it is not transparent in any way. They don't give you an indication of what was missing, what else needed, what was wrong with the evidence, or even how to improve their processes into the future so that these things don't happen again. And so, it's really interesting to say that from a legal perspective, you've gone, look, we're not getting anywhere here. We need to take it a step further. And I mean, it's a little bit disappointing that's the case, but I think it's definitely needed. I also think that a few times I have escalated things to solicitors and they've been like, look, I don't think there's anything we can do here. So from your perspective, why did you think that there was a chance that this would actually happen? I mean, someone had to be first, but how did you decide that this case had enough merits to actually go past just communicating with the agency?
Well, in a sense, taking the matter to court, one hope was, regardless of the result, the outcome, whether my client won or didn't, that was pressure that was being put onto the NDIA. My actual thought was the pressure on the NDIA would have resulted in the NDIA saying we'll make payment or we'll make a decision within that time, and we would have been happy to take the case back and withdraw the case. It was only when we realized that the NDIA still were unwilling to provide a date or give clarity that the case had to go forward. Look, it's complicated. The law is very complicated. There's a lot of administrative decisions and how a court can intervene in those decisions. I won't get too deep into that, but essentially it's common sense as well. And a judge looked at the situation, looked at a provider that was getting paid within 2 to 3 days, looked at the fact that provider provided documentation, and the NDIA essentially just sat on that request. So in a sense, and we're grateful to the court, but judges are very smart. And the bottom line was, this was unreasonable. And taking months to process payments when they used to get paid within 2 to 3 days is unreasonable. So really, it was common sense that prevailed in the end. Just looking at it as a human being and looking at how silly the situation was.
Look, these payment timeframes have blown out for a lot of providers, and we're seeing a lot of providers struggling financially because they're trying to make everything stretch, especially in a very tight space. Does this now set a precedent that 60 days is too long for payments? And does that mean that we could start to see things change in regards to the payment timeframes?
Yes, Paul. The answer is yes. 60 days is definitively too long, according to the federal court. The federal court judge didn't say exactly the time frame, but what he said in his judgment is that a period might be something in the vicinity of 2 weeks after the provision of documents. So that is sort of the guideline set by that judgment. Will that cause change? I don't know. I don't know. The NDIA were obviously present at court. Officers at different offices were present at court online, listening to this judgment. Whether there's going to be a change in the way the NDIA does things, I don't run the NDIA. I'm not the CEO, but I'm hoping it will. Yeah. Judging by the new clients that we're getting, though, there's not been much change.
Yeah, right. Because, a lot of providers, when someone comes to me and says, Paul, payment's taking forever, one of the things we do is, as Tania said, make sure all the ducks are in a row. Make sure all the documentation is up there. Get it in straight away. As soon as something is asked for, get it straight out. Make sure there are as little hoops as possible for them to work on. But, can they now use this, when they're talking to the NDIA, we've asked them to talk to like MPs and all those sort of things. Is this now something that they can reference, when they're trying to get things moving along?
Certainly, yeah. Obviously, the providers aren't lawyers, but simply giving the case to the NDIA and making them aware that you're aware there's a precedent here, indicating that the court said it should be about 2 weeks. An important part, though, is the job that Tania and yourself do and consultants do in terms of helping with documentation. That's obviously something I don't do. That's I don't know the inner workings of documentation requirements, which I work with consultants on. But if they provide that documentation and then they ask for a deadline and they provide this court case, if that gets them some sort of relief, that is good idea. And then if nothing is happening from there, then to obviously contact our office or other lawyers that may be able to assist.
Yeah, I did in the judgment. I did read that they had snippets of your communication between you and the NDIA, and I've been telling everyone that that's your game plan now. That's what you should be saying. They're the kind of communications, they've laid out for you the game plan of what communications to say, and heavily advise that if you do think there's a problem with any of the documentation you have, that potentially you need to seek legal assistance with this sooner rather than later, so that obviously it's not long and drawn out, that you've got assistance as soon as possible, to try and get this resolved as soon as it can be. In other government schemes, it's actually timeframes around certain actions for the government is actually legislated, such as in the aged care space, the Aged Care Quality Commission has 90 days, I think it is, to respond to someone who puts in an application. In the NDIS, there isn't timeframes around things like application timeframes, responses from the Commission, responses from the NDIA. Do you think we're likely to see that?
It'd provide a lot more clarity to providers, but I have my suspicions that is unlikely to occur. I mean, the NDIS scheme is quite new. The Act has only come in about 10 years ago now. The Aged Care Act is from 30 odd years ago, and it's been fine-tuned. I think the NDIA and the NDIS Commissioner are probably going to want a lot more rope to deal with sort of issues, and we all hear what's in the news about the NDIS blowing out of going out of budget, talks of fraud, and there's a lot of public opinion on some of these matters. So that might assist in forming the view that the agency must have a lot more power and a lot more time to do what it has to do. But the landscape is it's like the wild west essentially, compared to other government bodies.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the lack of clarity makes it really hard for small businesses to actually know what they can rely on. And in the aged care space, the 90 days as an example for registration outcomes, they can actually apply for another 90 days, but at least they have to have a point in which they have to actually give you an answer and tell you, okay, it's been 90 days, we're going to take another 90 days. But at least you kind of can prepare. I think running a small, most providers are small or medium businesses. There's only a few that are large. And for a small and medium business to operate in a government regulated scheme with no kind of definitive timeframes by the regulator, and it seems like they have a lot of power. I kind of think like in any other commercial dealing, if you are to do a service and be paid in arrears, which is what providers do, they could be providing, if you're a SIL provider that has 24/7 supports for a participant and you're getting paid in arrears by a week or 2 weeks, that might be $20,000 or $30,000 for one participant, for depending how many staff they have in that time period. And for a small or medium business to have a buffer of which could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think your client was 500 or so, I think it was almost $600,000 that was owed to them in that period. There's not many businesses that are small or medium that have that kind of cash flow. And so I think there really needs to be some kind of answer or another way that they can escalate these issues outside of the NDIA, whether, I don't know if the AAT has those kind of powers, if you can go to the AAT. If it was any other person delaying your payments for that period, you would go to small claims court. That would be quite cheap and cost effective to go to either NCAT or VCAT or any of the tribunals. And then if you didn't get action there, you would go to small claims court. But here it seems like because it's a federal agency, you have to seek a lawyer, which is quite costly as well early on to be able to escalate these issues.
Yeah, excellent points there, Tanya. And you raised issues about being able to go to the tribunal and to small courts. You can't at the moment. The way the NDIS Act is set up, there's certain reviewable decisions. So a decision, for example, to not register a provider, that's a reviewable decision. But what happens is you have to apply for an internal review. And then if your internal review is unsuccessful, then you can go to the AAT, and the AAT can provide stays. This payment integrity issue has no internal review process. You actually can't internally review it according to the NDIS Act, and you cannot go to the tribunal. So our client actually had no options but to go to the federal court at the first instance. So it is baffling. Other acts and other pieces of legislation do have those sort of earlier measures that a provider can seek relief through, but it doesn't seem to exist in the NDIS Act for certain decisions.
Yeah. It is baffling to me. It is really baffling to me that I mean, it almost seems unequitable to small and medium providers that they can decide at any point in time, look, we're going to be doing these random checks. And I'm all for making sure that there is integrity in the payments and that the payments are going to the right people. That's not a question. I guess it's just making sure that there's some kind of transparency about this process. Some of the letters that I've received start out by saying this is random. At random, we are selecting you. And then I've read letters where they randomly sampled multiple times in a period of time. And then it kind of becomes, well, this obviously isn't random now. This is a pattern. Once you're then, it almost seems like small and medium providers are being targeted and pushed out of existence by being pushed to the limit where they can't afford to continue operating their business. And then the agency says, okay, well, if you can't operate now, let us know and we'll put your participants elsewhere. And it's like, well, hang on a second. This is a person's livelihood. And we wouldn't kind of allow that in many other places. We wouldn't allow someone to hold back our payments without due cause or without explanation. We would want more information about exactly what the problem was, not just saying we've cancelled it or evidence hasn't been provided or what was wrong with the evidence. It seems like a lack of due process or a too much power for the NDIA to make these type of decisions without any kind of oversight or transparency or any kind of remedy to actually query and gather more information from providers.
Yeah, exactly right, Tanya. I mean, some of the letters have even said, can your client provide documentation that may assist in substantiating claims? And that line doesn't make any sense. That's essentially saying, give us what you think might help us process your claim. I've seen a lot of different some letters say that we're periodically reviewing providers, and this provider's on their third month and they're on their fifth or sixth review letter. That's not periodically reviewing someone. So it's definitely just a wide brush that's being used. It's not surgical, it's not targeted. I've had providers telling me about the past in that they've had spot checks on certain invoices, and they went through that process and they provided information to the NDIA, and payments were continued after that. But this current process it's essentially just choking providers financially completely, and especially when providers were being paid within 2 to 3 days for years. It really should have been sort of staggered in terms of the way that it was brought across.
Some people online have been comparing it to the robo debt, that the robo debt, and we've seen some cases where on the other side, participants have been told, look, you have a debt of X that needs to be paid back, and we have seen people take their own lives based on that, having to pay back, which is very similar to the robo debt type of thing that happened around Centrelink debts. Do you think that the NDIA is likely to learn from what we saw at the was it a Royal Commission into robo debt, or a review of the robo debt thing? Do you think that they're likely to learn from that? It seems like maybe they've taken learnings from them in the other way on the not good side.
Yeah, you'd hope so, but in terms of the providers that they're selecting, I'm not sure if they're selecting the largest providers for this payment integrity process, and that may not mean that these small to medium providers don't have the sort of firepower or the resources to take these matters on. The robo debt was a hallmark class action. I'm dealing with a number of different clients now. I haven't fully fleshed out the prospects of a class action. It's something that I'd probably need to discuss with counsel as well, or a barrister to investigate. But it's definitely something that can be looked at, particularly when you piece together all the other aspects of the NDIS Act and the rules around what documentation is required, what is required to be kept, and what the NDIA is now asking for to substantiate claims. There's a gap there, and that's a worrying gap. You can't hold someone's payment when you never told them that they needed to retain certain documents. So, to be honest, that's the part that lights up to me the most in terms of a potential case to put forth. But like I said, public opinion drives a lot of these stuff, and stories, and this podcast, the stories that talk about the impact on participants, especially, and on providers, that might help stir some change.
Yeah. Talking about class action, there is a group in LinkedIn that seems to be talking about a class action. And obviously you've said you'd need to seek advice if that is possible. But I believe, I'm definitely not a lawyer, but I believe it's like you need 7 people to do a class action. If there's more than 7 people, I think the report said that they had delayed something. There was millions of delays in the last quarterly report. I think it was $28 million worth of payment delays, and they had a number, maybe 300 or so plan managers who had their payments suspended during investigation. So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of providers being affected by this. If there is thousands of people that are being, we now know it is an unreasonable time frame, that is now precedent. Is it worth a class action, or is a class action about winning the class action to make a change, or is it just about making enough noise for the NDIA to give us some transparency and some guidelines around what the expectations are, and is that then the change that we need?
Yeah. At this stage, I've been helping clients on a client by client basis. There's differences in the issues each client is facing. I think, obviously, like you said, I'd need to get advice on the class action, but it could cause 2 issues. It could cause change directly in the pressure that it puts on the NDIA, or if it's a successful outcome, then obviously that will put in a new law, a new precedent, essentially. So I think I'm quietly retaining information in terms of all the clients that I'm assisting. You raised the issue of plan management. I think this payment integrity process is essentially killing off plan managers because they don't have the documentation required to substantiate the work that another provider has performed. So the design of a plan manager is basically in a way going to die out, because if they're required to retain all that information and they're only paid a certain amount of money to do the work, then it's going to be unsustainable. So that's another angle. Is it a class action involving plan managers? Is it a class action involving those who have provided documentation and haven't got a response? Is it those that are against the fact that the documentation is being asked in the first place that wasn't required before? So there's a lot of moving parts, but something definitely does have to happen, and there needs to be some external pressure, because at the moment the NDIS Commission and the agency are really they're really not held by any sort of rules or legislation, as you said.
Yeah, look, I mean that's what it feels like. It feels like, a rule for thee and a rule for me. We have to, all the providers have to jump through so many hoops, but no one is particularly holding NDIA to their side of the bargain. Every conversation I'm having with a provider that comes across my way, we're hearing that they are struggling with, either payment locks or long delays. I've got providers that are looking in that, several $100,000 range, and they've gone through and they've provided everything, and to the point of, regularly contacting their MPs and all these sort of bits and pieces. But what should they be doing now? Like, with this information of, the suit that was won and possible class actions, what's the best course of action for a provider currently experiencing these kind of issues?
Well, first, what I would say is document your interaction with the NDIA in terms of emails. So when you're contacting the NDIA, put it in writing. Try to get a response from them in writing, so that you can at least hold them accountable to what they're saying. Read the judgment for Northern Disability Services against the NDIA. It clearly shows that a court has found that what the NDIA is doing is unreasonable. Reference that in your correspondence with them. But if you're completely stuck, contact a lawyer, because there might be a solution. We can't guarantee solutions in the line of work that we do, but we can put as much pressure as possible. And obviously the NDIA is aware that there is a court that will adjudicate on these issues. And the case that was run was on unreasonable delay. It could be a different case. It could be a case where it's unreasonable in its decision on not paying someone. So there's scope to basically push back and not to just give up. A lot of providers are closing up shop. I've had a client who's had to close up, even though we just started assisting them, but they were already essentially on the brink of insolvency. So unfortunately, they're closing their doors. But you need to act fast and put everything in writing. Reference this case, and if you're not getting anywhere, contact our firm, and we'll see what we can do to assist.
I imagine that you are going to be very busy.
Yeah.
I can imagine that, especially that you have won the case and you're willing to have these conversations, because I know there's a lot of lawyers who are a bit like, well, look, I don't know if this is actually something worth pursuing. I don't know if there's something to be won here. I kind of get this feeling, and it's just my feeling, I could be completely wrong, but I kind of get a feeling that very often providers, the government wants us to feel that providers have no recourse, that it's just a matter of you do what you're told, and you should feel very privileged to be in this scheme, to be receiving government funds. And so it's almost unreasonable for a provider to be unhappy with something in the NDIA, about a payment specifically. But that really isn't the case. It needs to be fair and reasonable, and there are other legal remedies and other legal channels outside the NDIA, that they aren't the be all and end all. And that, I've been to the AAT about matters previously, and very often having another person look at it, they go, I don't understand why this is even here. And they throw it out quite quickly. And I've had clients who say that anytime they get to the AAT, it's always found in their favor. It just means that you have to actually take the step to push it to that next level. And in this case, there isn't an option for the AAT, as you said, so it needs to be done through another legal mechanism to get the point across that, we're not going to just let you not pay us $500,000 that we have actually provided services for.
Yeah, well, a lot of providers would be scared to do this. You're beholden to the government and the NDIA paying you consistently, and a lot of providers don't want to rock the boat. But if it means whether your business will exist or not, I think that's something that you need to really think about. and if you're willing to just, if it's something that you're not willing to pursue and you're willing to close up shop and enter another field, then that's a decision that you can make. But there is an option. You can fight these issues. You just have to be ready, willing, and able. And the NDIS is one of the hallmarks is choice and control for participants. For participants to be able to go to certain providers, maybe they speak the language that the participant speaks, maybe they understand their family values, maybe there's geographically. So for the providers have basically helped the NDIS scheme roll out, and they've been a big part of doing that. And to just select a certain percentage of them and just stop paying them, it really feels unfair. And things that feel unfair to most people might get you good outcomes in front of a judge or a member of the AAT.
Yeah. So does the NDIA need to pass the pub test, as we call it? I know it's a political term, but do they need to act fair and reasonably? Or what is the legal expectation of a government department when it comes to paying a provider? I mean, they have some kind of legal contract, surely.
Yeah, well, the Northern Disability case was brought under the Administrative Decisions Judicial Review Act, and that sets out a number of reasons that an agency essentially can be acting improperly. If there's a breach of natural justice, if procedures weren't followed, if essentially there was an error in the way that they interpreted a law, or if there was no evidence or other material to justify the agency making a certain decision. So you can look at all of those different options. We have administrative sort of barriers and sort of goalposts in which an agency has to work within. So that is the basis for bringing that case against the agency. So even though there's no laws, I mean, it's specifically for situations where there is no legislation that there's a lot of grey area that you'd need a court or a tribunal's intervention. If, like you said, it was like the Aged Care Act where deadlines were provided, then providers wouldn't be in this position. So a court has to stand in its stead. So writing to MPs is a very good idea as well. Legislation needs to be changed. And these gaping holes that provide the NDIA crazy powers, essentially, really needs to be plugged. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I think there's way too much power that the agency has. And it's funny because it seems to be, looking at the NDIS Commission, in many ways, they almost seem like a toothless tiger sometimes. Like they don't seem to penalise the people actually doing the wrong thing, like the providers that we saw in the current affairs story that were using unauthorised and illegal restrictive practices on children. They really had an opportunity there to penalise them to the full extent of the law and set both a precedent and to use that as an example to providers on what can happen, but they didn't really seem to use that opportunity. And so in that way, they're kind of not regulating within what we kind of expect a regulator to. But then on the payment side, they are being quite punitive and unfair potentially in their response to those matters. So it feels like sometimes they're not regulating appropriately, and then other times they're kind of being very heavy-handed. It seems, and I've seen this in other spaces in government where they go from one extreme to the other and the pendulum kind of swings back eventually. Do you think that that's what's happening here? It's just the pendulum has swung so far. There's a lot of political pressure. They're trying to save money in the NDIS, and so they're using payment locks and delays of payments for a political argument while we're coming up to an election. And once the election is over, we'll see the pendulum swing back to some kind of what we used to think was normal.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of speculation here, and this is all, but just as a general principle, look, the NDIS Commission and the NDIA, they have a tough job. I have to admit, it's not an easy job to do. It's a new program. And also, it probably was rushed in the end. It had to be rushed, otherwise it just wouldn't get done. And that's a really important aspect politically to be the one who brings the scheme in. No one remembers the person that waited until the scheme was ready or perfect to be rolled out. But it is not a common theme, but it's a theme I've seen in my practice as a lawyer in the past, where the government might roll out a program. Maybe it's not quite as ready as it needs to be, or it can't really be that ready because you need to see it in action before you make changes to it. And then it blows out of budget. Providers come running in thick and fast, and people are doing the wrong thing. Policing that it's not an easy task, but simply putting providers on payment holds, particularly ones that are doing, from what I see, are doing the right thing, have the documentation. I mean, if a provider is willing to fight, then I already know they're doing the right thing, because no one wants to go to court with the NDIA with skeletons in their closet. So there's proof in the pudding that these providers are sort of doing the right thing. But yeah, I mean, it's a really serious issue to just go and put holds on providers that have been working in the industry for 7 to 8 years. And it's really is a shame if that's what's going to happen to a large portion of the sector. It might cause, and I'm not sure if that's a intended consequence by the government, but it might cause the next person who wants to become a provider food for thought before they do that, and that could really reduce the diversity in the market, because that's another goal of the NDIS and the NDIS Act is to bring a diverse market, so that participants have a wide range of services that they can get. So it's counterintuitive. I mull that question over. How would you do this if you were running the NDIA? How would you manage this payment issue? But all I can say is not this way. That's what I can say. And spot checks. Spot checks is a much more reasonable way of dealing with this issue. Simply withholding all payment from a provider. I'm not sure which director or who at the NDIS or NDIA, I should say, thought that is a good idea. Or at the very least, have evidence against a certain provider in terms of what they've been doing before a payment lock is applied.
Yeah. It's almost guilty until proven innocent at the moment, isn't it? There's no real, we can just put a lock on your payment while we investigate if there's a problem, as opposed to we found a problem and now we are, I think everyone would be really happy if they said, okay, we have investigated, these are the issues, this is now, we are seeking you to repay this amount, or we are, taking this amount because you have done the wrong thing, and this is, this is the evidence, this is how we found it, and therefore this is the consequence. I think everyone would welcome that, because then that will show providers that you need to do the right thing, and that there's lots of practices in the space like cashing out participants and buying them TVs and all sorts of things that have crept into the scheme that most providers, if not all good providers, want to see those things removed from the scheme. But this doesn't seem to be the action that is taken. But maybe it is one step in the right direction. It's hard to tell. But you're right. I completely agree that I wouldn't want that job. I wouldn't want to be a politician either. I wouldn't want to be one of these government employees. I certainly don't think I have the answers, but I feel like providers really don't have a voice. I know we have a peak body, but I feel like there's no one really advocating for the small and medium businesses, mum and dad businesses, who are the majority of my clients have become a NDIS provider for one specific person. They've been touched by someone with a disability, whether it's their child, someone in their community, someone, and myself included. I became a special needs teacher because there was one boy with cerebral palsy who nobody wanted to teach and have anything to do with, and I thought he was amazing, and he changed my life. And that's usually the story of providers. Someone has touched their life. They've realized they can give back. It's a meaningful pursuit to spend your life. life, and they don't really have a lot of business acumen. They might have never dealt with a lawyer. They might have never dealt with an accountant. And so they feel very lost and confused and powerless in these situations. And I feel like, someone needs to advocate for these providers, because the majority of them, the vast majority, are really trying hard to do the right thing.
Yes, definitely. I mean, even a warning that, look, the NDIA is rolling out a payment integrity lock starting, from what I've seen, February, March. Make sure for all of your claims that you have X and Y. That's a major effect. To just do it in retrospect is on a lot of these providers that you talk about it's harsh. And it's really saddening. Some of the providers that I speak to, small businesses calling, crying, indebted. They're on their second or third overdraft. They've tapped out all of their networks, people in terms of loans, and they're just at the last straw. And it's really insensitive. And is it hitting the target in making sure the taxpayer money is spent properly? I don't know if it is, just to go and lock them up. So it's devastating for a lot of providers. And look, it's unfortunate that they would need to come and use our services or other services of other lawyers, but you also need to speak to a legal practitioner that's brave, that will take that extra mark, that will consider it, and that will, fight for your rights. So if they're at that position, they should really try and give us a call, or even give another lawyer a call that has some experience in administrative law, because it doesn't have to end there. And if there is some fight now, then it could help the scheme roll out and continue to improve. But if everyone just rolls over and accepts it, then it's unlikely to have any sort of meaningful change to the program.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you so much for your time today. I literally could talk to you all day about this. Yeah. It is something that I'm deeply passionate about and really think there needs to be a better solution. It's so great that you're doing the work that you're doing and that you're able to be that advocate and that voice for providers. I'll be definitely sending all of my clients your way. Can you give us your contact details or the best way for a provider to contact you if they need your services?
Yeah, you can simply Google QM Lawyers and our website comes up and our phone number. We're based in Melbourne. Obviously, with the NDIA scheme, it's federal. So if you're in another state, definitely still call us. And our contact details are all on our website. Our email is info@qmlawyers.com.au. And our office number is 9193 661. So it's not too difficult. So give us a call. And we'll try and work as hard as possible. Obviously, we're getting a large influx. If it hits the opportunity where a class action really is the way to go, and we can get that advice, then it might help a lot of providers. But at this stage, we just want to look at each person's circumstances or each provider's circumstances and push for them. But yeah, those are our contact details.
Great. Thank you so much. It has been great to chat with you. Our next episode is actually on managing payment delays and how to deal with cash flow with our friend Melissa Archer, who is an accountant in the space. So if you are affected by payment delays, obviously you can seek legal advice, but also managing that cash flow is really important. So that will be on the next episode of the podcast. Thank you again, Yusuf, for joining us today, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you, Tania. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast with Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. We hope you found today's episode informative and valuable. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating, and share it with others who could benefit from our insights. Until next time, keep thriving.